with JMU Hall of Famer and someone who knows a hell of a lot about taking it to the house.
Joyce breaks a tackle and goes in for a touchdown. Another spectacular run by Delvin Joyce.
Delvin Joyce brings his unique perspective to the podcast to break down all things he's seeing about JMU football, with a little help from EPA King Jack Fitzpatrick and Bennett Conlon.
Here he goes. He's going to try to beat the punter. He does. He's gone. And that is a touchdown.
Welcome into To the House.
Look at him jerk back and forth. Oh, he broke his ankles. Now he's got an entourage. And he's got a touchdown.
Now, here's Delvin Joyce with Jack Fitzpatrick and Bennett Conlon.
Welcome to episode 2 of To the House. I am your host, Delvin Joyce. Some people call me the People's Choice. I am joined by Jack Fitzpatrick, also known as Jay Feezy. What's going on?
All right, I'll take that. That's the first time I've ever heard that in my life, but I'll roll with it. We'll go with it.
So, Jack, I don't know if you noticed, I am extra hyped today because it was game week. We got to actually see these Dukes in action. We also got a dub, and we also got to meet each other for the first time in real life.
It was a blast. What a weekend it was. I can also hear, you can probably hear it in my voice. I can hear it in your voice as well. Probably a lot of cheering on Saturday, a lot of screaming and yelling, and you should have heard my voice yesterday. But it was an awesome time meeting you in person. It's been a lot of face-to-face via a screen, but seeing you face-to-face in real life. You did say I was taller in person. I didn't know how to take that.
Yeah, I thought you were my height. I also thought you were much older, and now that sort of explains, some of the Gen Z millennial stuff that I hear on the JMU Sports News podcast. So I'm going to give you a pass now. I thought you were much older. But yeah, it was awesome meeting you. It was awesome meeting Bennett as well. You guys came bearing gifts. You brought me a very nice bottle of bourbon, as I am a bourbon guy. So you brought me a bottle of Penelope, the Architect, which is one of my favorite pours. So very much appreciate it. And it's interesting as I went through the entire weekend, seeing a lot of these JMU folks, I also got a recommendation for a new bourbon that was released by the Montpelier Collective. And so they have their own whiskey that is going to support the NIL program at James Madison. And it is called Champions Drive. And I'm not going to say who recommended it to me, but he is also a bourbon guy. So I very much so trust his palate. And he says it's fantastic.
Heard it's a weeded bourbon as well. So if you like a weeded bourbon, it's very good. Bennett just got his in the mail, so I might have to drive up to his apartment and steal some from him.
No, you might have to go buy one yourself so we can keep our starting quarterback.
You're right. You're right. That is actually the best way I love when NIL collectives do stuff like this, because being able to shell over, I think it's $100, and rationalizing it in your mind that this is $100 to get a fantastic bourbon and to help keep ABIII here next year, where maybe just shelling out $100 for myself, I'm like, I don't know if I want to do that, but getting something in return, maybe I'm just selfish like that, but getting that bourbon really helps being able to shell over that money.
Not to sound like a cliche, but that is a win-win.
BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. From the preseason NFL to college kicking off, BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. Think you know your stuff? Get in on our winner-take-all $300,000 NFL Survivor Pool for the upcoming season. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of our over 150 slots games. Head to BetOnline today and use promo code BELIEVE, that's promo code BLEAV, to get in on the action. BetOnline, the game starts here.
And again, to your earlier point, we may have to, if you and I go to games in person, we may have to pick another night to record, because my voice is just now coming back. But I again, it was so exciting to actually be in the stadium and to have an opportunity to see this edition of the James Madison University Dukes. And, there's an old saying, you don't want to bite off more than you can chew. But I would also say I'd rather choke on greatness than nibble on mediocrity. So some people, I think, Jack, said when we moved up to FBS that we were biting off more than we could chew, right? Stepping up to that FBS level. And now some of those same people have ridiculous expectations for this program. Ridiculous expectations. I mean, I'm sitting in the stadium, and in the first 5 minutes, I'm hearing some of the things coming out of the crowd. Ridiculous expectations. Now, at times, right, for fans, I think our fans expect too much out of the program. I really do, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. But I also think that is a good thing, because in a lot of ways, we've been choking on greatness for the last 15 years. And so our fans have that expectation for us. But I think we also forget that the other team has scholarship players. The other team also has access to the transfer portal. The other team also has an NIL, right? And here's the other part of that, Jack. The other team also has a fan base that expects a win and has expectations for their program. And so as we have our conversation tonight about the takeaways from the Charlotte game, I want to frame it through the lens of, you know what? We've got to temper some of these expectations and grow with this new edition of the Dukes. What were your thoughts, I guess, in the stadium for the first time, though, and just kind of hearing the crowd and the JMU fans that showed up?
So I was over in the Charlotte family section. That's where our tickets ended up being. So we were hearing very different things. But between me, Bennett, and my friend Pat, who came to the game as well, a Charlotte guy that I met in Charlotte, we all were sitting there, and we were having immediate flashbacks to the Bucknell game, and we were getting real worried. I was also maybe a few drinks in at that point where things were. I was sitting there like holding my head. This can't be happening.
Wait, are you old enough to drink, Jack?
Barely, just barely.
Okay, that's
just
right.
just a few years,
maybe.
But then things started to settle in, and yeah, but those expectations are right there. So the second Alonza struggled a little bit, and they had, what was it, a 3 and out to start the game or something close to that. I think fans were like, "Oh, put in Dylan Morris. Why do we get this transfer from Washington? We can't lose this game. We have to win this game by 50 points."
Instantly wanted to put Dylan Morris in the game. And so I want to come to that for a second. I do want to take a second, though, to say that I thought that the atmosphere at the UNC Charlotte, I thought it was fantastic.
Great, yeah.
You know, I live in Charlotte. I've driven by the campus. I've driven through the campus. I've done some speaking engagements on the campus, but I never really spent any time there. What a beautiful place. And so, you know, I caught some shade from some of my UNC Charlotte alum friends in the area, because on the first episode of To the House, I called it a commuter school. And so I think they are trying to shed that image. But if you are from out of state, I could totally see why you would want to go to that school now, not necessarily only kids in the backyard of Charlotte.
Yeah, I think this is the first year too. Charlotte is requiring first-year students to live on campus. So they're really trying to shed that commuter school moniker.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a good thing. So, Jack, I want to go through some things that, you know, as we talk about, obviously we're going to talk about ABIII. And I love, you know, the title of this pod, right? ABIII restarts, right? And I want to talk about him and kind of his indoctrination into that starting role. And I just want to talk through the lens of some of the things that I sort of expected to see as the Dukes came out of the tunnel this week. And the first thing that I will say is that I expected to see a slow start on offense, especially. You know, they've been going against, you know, each other for the last however many weeks in camp and in practice and in, you know, spring game and all those things. They've been seeing the exact same people. And if you look at what happened in college football across the country, you saw a lot of football games that looked just like that. So I expected to see that slow start. Now, I don't know what your expectations were.
Well, I was saying it a lot, and this is also my way of always to try to temper my own expectations. I was high on Charlotte's defense going into that game. Ryan Osborne is a damn good defensive coordinator. And then you get into the mindset, you get into fan mode the second the game starts, and you want them to score on every single play. And that's just not realistic. I rewatched the game today, and I was blown away by actually how good the offense was, specifically in the first half. They couldn't, you know, execute a few times, but they kind of, on the rewatch, blew away my expectations. They moved the ball efficiently. The run game, which I'll ask you a few questions about the running game later on in the podcast, but the thing, they were moving down the field. Alonso was settled in. Alonso was making throws, a drop here, a batted ball there, and things kind of got off schedule. But for the most part, they stayed on schedule, and they blew away my expectations for what they were going in. In the moment, they didn't live up to my expectations. I was negative. There's never going to be a win in this program again. We're washed. And 48 hours later, I'm on the rewatch, and I was like, oh wow, I was so overreacting.
Now, Jack, not to age myself, but I think I am 20 years your senior, and so who advised you after the game, literally after the horn sounded?
You've been here before. You've seen this a few times. You did say, tomorrow on the rewatch, text me and let me know your thoughts on the game. And I think it was this morning where I was just like, okay, maybe I was a prisoner of the moment.
Yes, you were. And you said you were right. And, as a Virgo whose birthday is coming up because it is Virgo season, I love hearing those words. You were right. So anyway, and by the way, if astronomy is not, or if astrology is not a thing, how do you explain why Virgos are always right? Like, how do you explain that?
Look, I'm a Pisces. I don't know exactly what that means, but I just know Pisces are the best sign.
I think you're like a fish or something. So.
I am two fish.
But in terms of that slow start, right? ABIII, I think, started out 1 for 6. And so you kind of heard some of those. I was dumbfounded by the fact that we heard some boo birds in the first half. We also heard a lot of groans and mumbles and people saying they want, Dylan Morris. And, I think that when you think about a quarterback controversies are really mostly about fans. The quarterback controversy is never about the locker room or the coaching staff. And if you always think about, the last several quarterback controversies that you've seen at big time college football, it's always fans saying they want to see the other guy. The coaches have much more intimate knowledge of what the players are capable of. And once they've made that decision, then there's really no controversy in the locker room or the coaching staff. And so I heard a little bit of that controversy starting. Thankfully, ABIII was able to sort of put some of that to bed by some phenomenal play in the second half.
Well, the second he connected with George Pettaway with 50 seconds to go in the first half, you're like, oh, that's why they made him the start. Like, his deep balls were some of the best I've ever seen. And
I was in that end zone.
Yeah.
So the JMU fan section was in that end zone. And we literally watched him toss that ball like a flick of his wrist. And it was a perfect dime. And in the moment, I didn't even realize that was Pettaway.
I thought it was Dollison.
I was like, which receiver is this who caught this ball? Because he caught it at the very back of the end zone. I mean, it was a great throw, but I think it was an even better catch. And when you go back and you see that it was a running back who made that catch, I mean, hats off to both of those young men. And that makes me even more excited for what we're going to see from this offense.
I mean, the offense had so many wrinkles. The Cam Ross end around reverse. You saw the Logan Kyle on 4th and 1 hand off as he was in motion. You're getting the tight end involved in the running game. He didn't get the first down, but you love to see that. I don't know if you heard this as well. The first pass play of the second half was the Alonzo Barnett throw to Dollison. It was a little up and out. Dylan Morris called that play at halftime.
Yeah, I did not hear that.
Apparently in halftime, Morris just kind of said, this play is going to work from what we've seen in the first half. And Chesney and Kennedy and Barnett believed in it enough. They called it as the first pass play. And what did it go? And it just allowed a 70-yard touchdown?
73 yards. That. I mean, listen, that is fantastic. And I think Dylan Morris, I think Coach Chesney said this in his press conference after the game. I think Dylan Morris still has a role to play on this team. So, I feel bad for that young man that he's, obviously there's only one quarterback that can play. And so we said it last time, we just want the best person. Right now, it seems that's ABIII, but I hope Dylan Morris keeps his head up and will, continue to be a great teammate, which it sounds like from Coach Bob Chesney's press conference, that is exactly what's happening. These guys are rooting each other on.
It's going to be awesome. And it feels like now in today's era of football, you're going to have your backup play a few meaningful reps this season. It feels really good to have Dylan Morris back there. And he's, I mean, a Pac-12 former starter who it sounds like barely lost out to Alonzo Barnett. And that's the backup. That feels really good for, inevitably when Alonzo has to miss a drive or, God forbid, a game or something like that.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I mean, imagine, the embarrassment of riches when the Power 5 transfer is your backup. So
Yeah.
I feel really good about where we are, especially if ABIII is going to be using his legs this year. That's a little scary. Every time he took off running, he made some fantastic runs. But for me, I'm like, get down.
Get down.
Right?
Yep.
We don't need any injuries. The other thing I did expect to see, I know we're going to talk about the running game a little bit later. I did expect to see some missed blocking assignments. I expected to see that because the timing and all those things that in theory, of course, work in practice. But when you're going against another team that's running a totally different defense, they're going to throw their own wrinkles out there. You're going to miss some assignments. And I think we saw that. There were 10 tackles for loss in this game that Charlotte had. And listen, I'm sorry. Charlotte's defense is spectacular. I don't know what we thought we were going to see, but that front four is really, really good. I don't think they have a player under 6'4" on that defensive line. 2 out of the 4 guys with their hand in the dirt are Power 5 transfers. Only one of those guys is a homegrown recruit to Charlotte. And then the other guy is a call up from FCS, which means that he was an absolute dog to get a ride and then win the starting job. So again, hats off to Charlotte. I think their front four was fantastic and it showed.
I think Ryan Osborne, their defensive coordinator, is going to be at a Power 5 gig sooner rather than later. He's very good at what he does. He did some fantastic things with his scheme. Stone Handy, he was in the backfield early on, had that TFL, and then he pile drove. I think it was Petaway, got a flag for it. But like the sheer power it must take to not only stop a full-grown football player running, picking him up, and pulling him back. Great, it is a flag. It's a flag for a reason.
Why is that a penalty? I mean, I'm okay that it was a penalty because it worked in our favor, but he just tackled the guy.
The former running back saying this. So I mean, you gotta listen to this.
Yeah, bro. I've been power drived, or whatever you want to call it, power driven several times. I don't know why that's a penalty. I'm glad they threw the flag, but listen, it's football. It's not. What is that? What is that sport that everybody's playing now?
Pickleball. Pickleball.
It's not pickleball. It's not pickleball, right? We're playing football. So I didn't understand that penalty call, but yeah, Stone Handy. I mean, that dude is like, is probably one of the scariest dudes I've ever seen. Like he didn't even smile in his media day picture.
6'4", 240, I think he was. He could probably run a 4.5 just off of pure look, like just looks alone. But then they got some good talent in the back of their defense with Dante Balfour. He was a baller. He had that interception on where Alonzo thought it was an offside. On review, probably should have been called an offside, but Throws it up. Balfour makes a great play on the ball. He makes an interception. So your secondary looks good for him. Their linebackers were nothing to sneeze at. Like, very good defense for Charlotte that JMU's offense was eventually able to wear down and start to find some more consistent plays as the game went on.
Yeah, and that consistency, I think, is really a function of the team sort of sticking together as well. So when I think about my expectations, when I say the things that I expected to see, I expected to see this team face some adversity and actually stick together. Because we talked about it in the first episode, Jack. The things that we heard coming out of camp, this is a brotherhood. We're a team. We have to stick together. We have to do these things together. And, when I had a very good viewpoint of the sideline, there were no pointing fingers. There was nobody getting down. It was high fives. It was pats on the back. It was a lot of let's go. And the fact that this team was able to stick through some of the adversity that they faced in the first half, I think also led by Alonzo Barnett, I think really helped them to come out in that second half and just wear Charlotte down.
I was watching Bob Chesney there for a bit, and so was Bennett as we flipped to the JMU side once we got some dirty looks from the Charlotte fans in the family section. Makes sense. But we got over there, and Bob Chesney was coaching them up. Like, you never really saw Cignetti was very much the CEO coach. I'm going to delegate to my coordinators, to my position coaches, and I'm just going to stand with my hands on my hips, with my back arched a little bit, watching the game.
Thumbs forward,
all, the whole nine. But Chesney, there was a play where Bennett actually pointed this one out, where Barksdale turns his head when he's in coverage and kind of slows down. This is, I think, in the fourth quarter, slows down in his coverage, stops moving his feet. And Chesney, he comes off the sideline, and Chesney immediately goes right up to Barksdale. He can't slow down there, and just gives him an opportunity, finds it, coaches him up, doesn't do it in a rude way, in like a, old school coach yelling at him type of way. Just takes that moment, uses it to coach him up, tell him how to do it, and then moves on to the next play. And Barksdale had a fantastic game.
Well, I was really impressed with Chesney's demeanor on the field. I didn't really get a chance to see it until I watched the playback. I mean, I tried to keep my eye on him a little bit during the game. And you're right. He was coaching guys up. He was very encouraging, very, very positive. And I think one of the things that we always sort of trusted, I don't know if it's you, but for me, I always trusted Cignetti's game plan going into the game. Like, even if we were outmatched, I knew that if Cignetti had enough time to prepare, he was going to develop a fantastic game plan, and that alone would keep us in the game. And so I think as a fan base, we have to start building some of that trust in Coach Bob Chesney and the entire staff. And we just got to sort of trust the game plan. I feel like, that first half, things didn't go well, and the fans didn't necessarily trust that things were going to turn out the way we wanted them to.
Not only the game plan, can you trust it? You can trust the adjustments they're going to make at some point during the game. The adjustments they made from the first half to the second half, even in the second quarter, Max Brown started that game on fire for Charlotte. He was kind of picking apart JMU's defense. He was using his legs, and JMU didn't really have an answer. It was a tough, weird fumble that he had, just Charlotte continuously shooting themselves in the foot time and time again in that first half. And then things kind of flipped, and Max Brown couldn't hit an open receiver. The tight ends were a huge part early on for Charlotte's offense. Lyle Hemphill said, all right, never mind. You're not throwing to them for the rest of the game. And Max Brown didn't know what to do with himself. The run game never got going. The adjustments, specifically the defense made, were really, really great to watch.
Yeah, those second half adjustments. I mean, I think, again, that was always an advantage under Cignetti. Like, we're going to come out at halftime and we're going to do pretty well because, I thought Cignetti was a very, very smart coach. I think his entire staff was smart. I think the fact that he came from Alabama also, I think under Nick Saban, I think it always gave me some level of comfort. And I think we're just going to have to learn some of the things that are going to happen under Chesney. And I think it's going to be even better. Now, some of the things that actually surprised me, I was surprised that our kick return coverage was so bad. That was not something that I was expecting going into that game. And Charlotte, every time, and again, I'm looking at this as a kick returner. And there's an old saying that we have as kick returners: if you can make one miss, you can make 10 miss with one move. And there were so many kicks in that game where the return guy was one move away from making all 11 guys on our defense or on our coverage unit miss. And I was nervous every time we kicked the ball.
He's good back there. He was pretty good.
He's a beast.
He was pretty good. That one right before the end of the first half, you score with 50 seconds left, you kick it to him. I think he brings it out to the 30 or the 35 and was one move away from making us look bad.
No, I think he brought it out past the 40.
Okay, was it past? It was
a
lot. It was a lot.
It was past the 40. So again, some things that we got to tighten up. And that kind of thing happens. First game, kickoff return and kick coverage is one of those really hard things to practice in training camp, because you're not going to run down the field and tackle the return guy in practice. Like, nobody does that during training camp. And so, I sort of expected that, but I just was a little surprised that we had that. Now, the other thing that surprised me were some of the letdowns that we had on third down. I mean, there were some third down plays, obviously, specifically the big run that they had. I think it was 3rd and 25. and and we
Uh-huh.
came up like, right up the middle to the running back. I mean, he almost went, to steal a phrase from this podcast, to the house, if not for a shoestring tackle by, I think it was Jacob Thomas.
It
Who
was
made
Jacob
that?
Thomas. It was whew.
Yeah, what a phenomenal tackle. But yeah, so some of that stuff, I mean, again, you're gonna see that, but that did surprise me. I was also very surprised, Jack Fitzpatrick, that we did not kick the field goal on that first drive. I mean, I listen, you were on the road. You got your young quarterback out there. He had just made a phenomenal pass to get us in scoring position. I know we were all disappointed that we didn't punch it in, but you know what? Take the points on the road.
No.
Give them some confidence.
No, this might be a fun little thing we have going on for the rest of the season. I love going forward on 4th down.
Yeah,
That
of
that's
course you do.
fan
You're 27 and you play college football 25 every day.
that
That's
was
what you do.
fantastic. In theory, you get 50% of those. It's wild that they missed both of them in the first half, both of their 4th down conversions inside the 5. In theory, when you execute that out, over the course of the season, there should be around 50%, maybe a little higher on plays like that. And if you're at 50%, you've gained a point across the entire game because you've scored at least one touchdown. And
No, no, I listen, I
no, I know
understand
you
that,
know. I know
and
you're
I
much smarter than me.
I understand metrics. I understand that wholeheartedly.
It's so
But
we got a coach that knows it.
here's the other part of it. We lost a yard on the 3rd down play. We lost a yard. I think we lost a yard and a half. And so if we had maintained at least, the line of scrimmage on that 3rd down play, then maybe you go for it on 4th down because we were really close. The fact that we lost a yard and a half, I didn't love the 4th down call as well. The ball got batted down. It was into traffic. It's tough throw in that situation. Take the points. Now, here's the other part of that, Jay Feasy. If we are at the Mullet and we're in the exact same situation, we're at Bridgeforth Stadium, I would absolutely go for it in that situation. But you had an opportunity, right, to at least take their crowd out of it a little bit, build on the momentum that our crowd got into with that long pass, that beautiful pass. Let's get some points. Let's play defense.
You're not wrong. The thinking's there. I just love going for it on 4th down. So you're never gonna get me off of this. Go for it every time. Have faith that your offensive line can generate 2 yards of push, 3 yards of push, which they couldn't really on that drive, which might be a little topic a little later. But just have trust that your team's gonna push it in. Unfortunately, they didn't, but I love going for it there because if you score that, now we're playing the what if game, which is one of my least favorite games to play when talking about football. But if they scored there, all of the energy from Charlotte fans are out of that stadium.
Yeah, but if we put 3 points on the board, I mean, a young quarterback goes to the sideline. He feels pretty good about himself that he made a throw that led to 3 points. All right. So anyway, I'm not second guessing. I am not playing Monday morning running back.
Oh,
But I do like the idea of getting points there. Now, I wasn't upset with the second time we went for it on 4th down. I actually kind of like that call. In the second quarter, we're down 7-3. I don't want to go into halftime at down 7-6. At that point, I don't think we thought we would get the ball back. Go for the touchdown. Let's go into the locker room with a lead. I like that call.
I also love the play call there because that 4th down play call the very first time. That's a tough play because you got to thread a needle. You have to assume the line. There's just a lot happening in a very short amount of time in a very small amount of space. But that one, kind of a wheel route to Logan Kyle. You're trying to hit him on that the Charlotte family side close pylon. See if he can get his feet down. Unfortunately, he couldn't come down with the ball. But I love that play call, and it was thrown perfectly by ABIII.
Perfect throw. And I just. Man, I thought he came down with it.
I thought he did too.
It was almost a highlight. Like I think it was it would have been a SportsCenter highlight. But
one
of the other things that surprised me in that game, and this comes from the other side of the sideline. It was Biff Poggi, right? In his post-game press conference, he said that his team came out lethargic in the second half. Now, I'm going to tell you something. Do you know what time the second half kickoff actually took place?
Was it like 10?
I mean, it was like 9:45, 10 o'clock at night. And, I think Coach Chesney, all training camp long, he's always talked about practicing like an NFL team and going over situations and putting the team. I mean, I think they had the band performing at practices to simulate crowd noise and band noise and all these things. And I gotta think that Coach Chesney had done something to prepare the team for the fact that they were going to be kicking off at 8 p.m. because there is a whole lot that goes into that, Jack Fitzpatrick. I mean, you got to wake up. You're going to go to some meetings. You're going to go to your pregame meal. You're going to watch football all day, right? You're going to be thinking about the game all day. And then finally, you get a chance to kick off at 8 p.m. That is a long day. It was a long day for me. I was worn out by the end of the game. And I'm reminded by, my first time ever playing on Monday Night Football in the NFL. We're playing the Eagles at the Vet. And I'm going out to catch a punt. It's like 11 o'clock at night. And I'm running on the football field. I'm normally asleep at this time, by the way. I'm running out on the football field to catch a punt, and I'm yawning. So if you are not prepared, I'm literally yawning on the football field, right? At the Vet, people going crazy. I'm yawning on the field. And so the fact that team, Biff Poggi admitted that the team came out lethargic. I think the fact that they were playing in this late night game, maybe they didn't do the same type of preparation that Bob Chesney had done with his team. And that led to a lethargic team in the second half.
You saw it. Their legs got tired. They got slower. JMU started destroying them in the trenches, beating them off the snap. I mean, there's a reason why Chesney had both of the scrimmages during training camp. I think kickoff at around 7 p.m. And they didn't finish until 9:30, 9:45 for both of those scrimmages. There's a reason for that. There's a reason everything was done under the light.
Buying in, Jack? Are you buying in?
Look, Chesney is a damn good football coach. Chesney knows what he's doing. And I'm also buying in that Biff Poggi should go back to being a hedge fund manager because you got 9 starters out and your team wasn't ready for a late night kick, which you knew was going to be a late night kick all off season.
Well, I mean, he also admitted that the team was worn out. And he said that like our team is worn out.
He doesn't know what a press conference is. Like, you don't have to be that honest.
Yeah. He's like, our team was worn out. And I would have to think that if I'm the strength and conditioning coach, I'm going to take that personal. And, the thing that we've heard come out of James Madison camp all summer was the fact that, Coach Novak, the strength and conditioning coach for the football team, has prepared this team ad nauseum, right? Like, I think ABIII in his presser said that, he's taken them to hello and back. And so if you think about the juxtaposition of the two teams, now there was another thing that maybe played into that. I'll talk about that in a second. But if you look at the two teams, fatigue makes cowards of us all. And UNC Charlotte looked very, very tired in the second half of that game. And we looked like we had just sort of warmed up and come out for a brand new first half kickoff. So very, very interesting for me. Now, I want to go back to the injured player thing, because I think we started the week with Biff Poggi at his press conference saying, we're down 8 or 9 players. And I don't know if you saw that. I mean, he looked really, really dejected. Yeah. He also fell on the sword and said it was his fault that these players. So, I mean, I've never seen somebody fall on the sword so much and take so much blame. But did we ever actually figure out who the players were that were supposed to be hurt?
I didn't. I couldn't figure it out from the stands. I think Twitter was trying to figure it out, specifically Charlotte 49er fans, but I never got like a definitive list of like, these are the 8 to 9 players that were hurt. So they're missing some guys, but I'm not sure. They're wide receivers. Maybe they're wide receivers because they were not getting much separation all night.
Yeah, I never quite saw it. And, if the players that were hurt were on defense, then man, they must have some real dogs.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I had heard that maybe there was a couple of offensive linemen who were out. But shout out to Charlotte, man. I thought they played a great first half of football. Just maybe weren't in the greatest condition, but maybe also not as deep as JMU. So the other thing that really surprised me is the amount of players that we rotated in and out on the defensive side of the ball.
Thank you for bringing this up. And the offensive side. I've never seen anything like that.
Never.
It got to a point where they took out Chauncey Logan and Justin Eaglin, the cornerback 1 and cornerback 2, and brought in Jordan Taylor and Terrence Spence, in theory, the cornerback 3 and 4. And I was sitting there like, what? What? They would bring out Trent Hendrick and Jacob Dobbs and bring in Torres Jones and Gannon Weathersby. And it was just like, huh? Okay. Are we testing out different platoons? Are we going to do hockey subs this season?
And we have fresh legs. I mean, it really, really showed. I think there was one point where I saw Keenan Flo out on the field, KJ Flo from Charlotte. Now, I'm glad he got some burn because he's from Charlotte. He probably had a ton of family there. But he comes in, he makes a tackle on their tight end on the sideline, like a solo tackle. I think he had 2 tackles and a pass deflection. And so to go that deep on your roster, a true freshman coming into the game and making contributions, if we can maintain that level of depth in our defensive and offensive schemes, watch out. I mean, these guys are going to be so fresh at the end of the game, not to mention what Coach Novak's doing for them.
It was really interesting offensively too with it, because Joseph Simmons was coming in number 79. I don't know if you noticed this, but he would come in for Pat McMurtry, the right tackle. He'd come in for Ramil, the left tackle, and he was kind of like giving them quick breathers for maybe a drive or a few plays, and he'd come out and, go from one. And it's just like, I've never seen this before.
Yeah, it was fantastic. Now, I think the other surprise for me, I mean, Dollison, the speed that we have at our skill positions. I know we've had some speed in the past, but we have some absolute burners at the skill positions. Dollison is a blazer. Of course, our guy George Pettaway, right? GP, he's an absolute burner. And then the receiver, and I'm totally drawing a blank right now. Come on, help me out.
Cam Ross,
yeah. Cam Ross, that guy is a speedster as well. Not to mention, you got Ymir Knight, who didn't really get any touches, but he's also a speedster guy. He did get one, I think, a screen pass.
Yeah.
And I saw a little burst there. And then, by the way, you got your quarterback who has a second gear that I did not know he had and almost broke away from the entire defense twice in that game.
He, in the pocket, when you watch him just as a pocket passer, you're like, oh, he can evade a guy here and there, but he's not going to make you miss in a phone booth. And then he gets out in the open field and you're like, oh, he's got like running back speed. Wow. Okay. All right. Sure.
Yeah. So one of the things we're not talking about is the fact that my guy had almost 200. He had over 200 yards passing, but he also had 89 yards rushing. And so that is going to be trouble. I mean, that is going to spell trouble for opposing defenses. Now, my last takeaway from this game, I gotta say, for me, I was really surprised that the refs let them celebrate touchdowns. I mean, I watched football all weekend. Of course, I was partying all day Saturday, so I missed a lot of games. So I watched a lot of the games on replay on Sunday, and there was a lot of celebrations. And I'm wondering if the referees are at home playing college football 25 and because there's celebrations on there, but I saw some more elaborate celebrations in real games and there were no flags thrown.
Did you watch the LSU USC game last night?
I did. Yes.
So the LSU receiver gets flagged for a celebration because he does a gun motion towards the USC players.
That's out of bounds. Yeah.
Let's think it through. It's out of bounds.
But throat slash.
But I heard the announcers, I think they were talking with one of the rules officials where you're allowed to, they're allowing players to celebrate more if you celebrate towards your own sideline and towards your own players, where it's not taunting, but you can celebrate.
Yeah, I actually like that. I think that's right. I mean, you don't want to go crazy, you don't want to do like ridiculous stuff, embarrass your university, but I do think for all these players, they should be able to have a little fun, especially because, some of them are millionaires now, right? So let them have a little fun. Any final thoughts, I guess, on the game and just big takeaways for you on the way this thing went?
So I have a question for you, Delvin,
Talk
because
to me.
watching the rewatch, the only thing that I left still a little negative was the running game never found its rhythm that I was expecting it to find. And I'm kind of having flashbacks. It felt like last offseason, this offensive line is going to be so good. The running back room is going to be so good. There's no reason why they shouldn't average 150 yards rushing per game. Io had 16 attempts, 41 yards. Petaway was very good rushing the ball, 8 attempts for 30 yards. But ABIII was averaging 7+ yards per carry a year ago, 2.6 on Saturday night. Is this just an issue of it's new in the season? It's going to take some time for that offensive line and running backs to gel with each other, or should I hit the panic button?
Yeah, Jay Feasy, I think there's a number of reasons why the running game didn't quite gel in that game. And I think the first is that, what we talked about earlier. I mean, a lot of it is just first game sort of kinks that you got to work out. And the running game is so intricate. And listen, the other side has scholarships. They have, I mean, they had a very capable front four that I think was very disruptive to our running game. And so when you have the confluence of, new offense, a lot of these offensive linemen, they're still in thinking mode. They're not in the unconscious, sort of, I can just not even think and do my job and do it really well. So they're not in the unconscious competence stage yet. And so I think we're just going to have some growing pains in the running game right now. I think the other part though is if you look at the second half of the ball game, we actually started to make some plays. So tale of two halves. First half, a lot of TFLs. I don't know that we had too many TFLs in the second half. I also know that we slashed them for 5-6 yards a carry, which is what I think we need to do to be successful in the running game. The last thing I'll say, and I'm going to boomerang it back to you, Jay Feasy. The last thing I'll say is that, in that sort of read option game, I think for AB3, he's going to have to keep a couple of those every now and then just to keep the defense honest. When we're in the stands, we're like, wow, if he had just kept that, he would have hit his head on the goalpost.
Yeah.
What you realize as a fan is that the reason that he's wide open on the keep is because he handed the ball off and the defense saw that he handed the ball off. So he's not as open as you think. But I do think there were some opportunities there for him to keep that ball and actually make a play.
Yeah, I would agree with that because the quarterback reading the defensive end, if he stays for that split second, he's going to hand the ball off. And so, of course, then the defensive end is going to crash as hard as he can, leaving the edge wide open, making Alonso look like he could have just walked it in. I do agree. I think there'll be a few times this season where once Alonso starts to really find the flow of a game, he's gonna keep a couple of those for big gains.
Dude, we saw the same thing last year with Jordan McLeod, running the exact same sort of scheme. And there were weeks where we were begging him, McLeod, please keep the ball. You would score if you had kept it. And then eventually, I remember the Georgia State game. I was there. I was sitting there, and he started pulling the ball, and he made some really big monumental runs in those games. And so I think AB3 is going to sort of find his way in that scheme. All these guys right now are still thinking. And when you're thinking, you're not making plays. And as soon as they stop thinking and they can start to react, they're going to make big plays. And I think that's going to be one of them.
What week do they typically stop thinking?
I think that's going to happen again. This is a new offense. So, the great news is that we have Gardner Webb coming in this week, and then we've got a bye week to prepare for North Carolina. So as we segue to talking about, I guess, this Gardner Webb program and the expectations that we have for this upcoming week, I think that this is a fantastic opportunity for this team to sort of hit the reset button, watch a lot of film, see the things that they've done well and that maybe that they did not do so well, and come out against Gardner Webb and really put on an exhibition.
It's really nice having 2 bye weeks before the Tar Heels.
Oh, here he goes. Yeah, of course you would have that take. Now it's all making sense, right? I mean, I'm not going to totally disrespect that program. I do think that Gardner Webb has been a very capable FCS program over the last several years. If you look at some of the games that they've put up against some FBS schools, I mean, they've actually hung in there in some of these games. So I do not believe that Gardner Webb is actually going to come in and roll over for the Dukes, but I do believe that JMU just has way too much firepower for this game to be in any way competitive, especially considering Gardner Webb's coming off a loss to Wofford, who I'm not sure is necessarily supposed to light it up in FCS this year.
I'm worried that we're just going to roll through Gardner Webb because they're on a first year. Their head coach, new Trey Lamb, was their head coach the last few years. He was one of the bright young stars in the coaching world. I think he's like 34 or something like that. He's very young, and he just left to go to East Tennessee State, ETSU. And we'll see what the Gardner Webb running Bulldogs are like under new head coach Chris Reisert. I might be mispronouncing that, but he was the head coach of Tiffin University, where he went 40-11 and a great Midwest Conference record of 32-4. So not sure what Tiffin was like before he got there, but he's taken over a Gardner Webb team, lost a lot of players in the portal, and he has to kind of take them back to where Trey Lamb had gotten them.
Yeah, I think, again, you heard my dialogue around coaching changes. Players are going to play harder for the coaching changes. I will say, if I am Coach Chesney, what I really want to see this week is the team actually come out and execute. Like this is the opportunity to come out. We don't have anything. I don't think we don't have anything to worry about. It's kind of like being a heavyweight boxer and you're fighting a guy that you don't believe can knock you out. You've touched or tasted their power, and you're not concerned about their power, right? And that gives you a certain freedom to go out and box your boxing match, right? I think that's sort of what the Dukes are going to face this week. They don't have a knockout punch that we should be concerned about. And so it's really a good opportunity for us to not show anything. I don't expect to see any reverses or any circus plays like the one we had on that end around. But let's just execute our offense and run some basic defenses and dominate.
Yeah, not to sound too coach speak, but just work on the fundamentals, control what you can control, and just play your game. Do your job, as Bill Belichick loves to preach.
Yeah. Now, I hopefully we will get an opportunity to practice our kickoff coverage a lot this week. And so that means that we're scoring a lot. I do not want to practice kickoff return. We should only have one kickoff return this game. But our punt return team should also get a lot of work. And those are the things that we really need work on going into Chapel Hill, not to look past Gardner Webb. But it's going to be very nice to go into that bye week, knowing that we've essentially had 2 weeks to sort of rest up and prepare for what should be a very, very winnable game against UNC.
I'm very excited to see Joby Mallory against Gardner Webb. The FCS transfer didn't see the field against Charlotte, but I think he's a 6'2", 240, 6'3", 240 running back. I just want to see him do what he does best, and that's just like run for a lot of yards against Gardner Webb.
Yeah, I was surprised by that. I was surprised that he didn't get any burn, but I was also pleased to see that Tyler Purdy got in the game and had a couple of carries, had a couple of really nice carries. And so, it looks like we've got some real depth in the backfield. Hopefully all those players get some burn this week, and it should be, I think, an overall fun game. Very ironic that our first 3 opponents are North Carolina teams.
I was going to say, how do you feel about the tour of North Carolina with one pit stop in Harrisonburg hosting the North Carolina team?
I think it's great. I mean, me being here in Charlotte, what's great about moving to the Sun Belt is there are 4 or 5 schools that are closer for me being here than actually going to Harrisonburg. So I love it. But we'll see. I think again, Gardner Webb, good program. Obviously the Dukes have too much firepower, Look forward to breaking this game down next week on episode 3.
Love
All
it.
right. So you know what time it is, Jack. It is your favorite segment. It is our opportunity to ask, what you talking about, Willis?
What you talking about? What you talking about? What you talking about? What you talking about, Willis?
All right. So this week's What You Talking About, Willis? I mean, I always want to go get some news from around college football. But this week, I have to keep it in this game, James Madison versus UNC Charlotte. And apparently, there is a little bit of scuttlebutt around the fact that JMU scored in the fourth quarter with 1 minute and 4 seconds left. And, I don't think anyone talked about it. I don't think Biff Poggi talked about it in his press conference. But Coach Bob Chesney alluded to the fact that Biff Poggi felt some kind of way about the fact that JMU punched it in at the 1 yard line at the end of the game. And, I just got to say for Coach Biff Poggi, and again, all due respect to that man, I don't know him, but what you talking about, Willis? I mean, we are in an era of college football where it matters. Margin of victory matters. And when we get to the end of the season, JMU is playing for, I want to say, that 12th seed in the college football playoff. And the selection committee is not going to look back on the margin of victory and see that we beat Charlotte 23-7 and say, well, you know what? They had the ball on the 1 and they could have scored. They're not going to give us that grace. Just like they're not going to look back and say, well, it was 23-7 and Charlotte wasn't going to call their timeout. And so who cares? They're not going to look back on that and say that. So I am glad that we punched the ball in and scored there. And you know what? I am of the school that if you don't like it, then stop it. You had your players on the field. We had our players on the field. I understand sportsmanship, but what you talking about, Willis? We're going to go score there. Jack, what did you think about that?
I'm in the same boat as you. If you don't like it, stop it. Like, you have every opportunity. You have 11 guys out there. Like you were saying earlier in the podcast, you have scholarships.
Right.
Do something about it. Like, sorry,
Yeah.
we beat you, and then put in.
And for what it's worth, I mean, it was a 2-score game. They still had timeout. There's over 1 minute on the clock. Like, it's not like we punched that thing in with 4 seconds left. There was over 1 minute on the clock. And I've seen crazy things happen in sports. So I am not mad at that. Shout out to Bob Chesney, though. What a great guy. I mean, I've never heard a coach apologize like that. I mean, he owned up to it. He said that he thought he probably should not have done that. I've never heard a coach say something like that, but shout out to him. He is a better man than me.
Yeah, the things I would have said would not be that nice, but like, it was also like a run heavy drive going down the field. It's not like they were, play action, bombing it over their heads, taking advantage of corners that were probably playing press because they knew a run was coming. Like what I do in the college football video game. The second I see the corners press, no safety, I'm going all go and I'm going to run up the score. You couldn't stop the run. You had stopped it all game. You couldn't stop the run. Just stop it. And don't be upset.
I mean, if you don't like it, stop it. I mean, I'm with you, man. All right, JMU Nation, it's time for us to take it to the house. Of course, this is my closing commentary, and I got to go to my guy, Alonzo Barnett III, because he said something in his post-game presser that reminded me of something my dad said to me after a very disappointing finish to a high school football game in my sophomore year. Now, at the end of the game, when it mattered most, I lost a fumble, and it cost my team the win. And I was in tears and pretty much inconsolable. I couldn't face my teammates who I had just let down, let alone my family and the fans who had come out expecting to see our team walk away with a victory. On the drive home from the game, I didn't say a word, but my pops broke the silence and said simply, if the worst thing that happens to you in life is that you fumbled a football, then you will have had a good life. He wasn't saying it didn't matter. He was saying, pick yourself up and move on. It was exactly what I needed to hear. Now, we've talked all episode about the redemption of ABIII this week, right? But again, it was what he said after the game that struck me the most. He said, if I'm learning my life lessons through the game of football, I'm blessed. Not that it didn't matter, that he got benched last year. Not in the LeBron James, it's just basketball tone, but in a truly introspective acknowledgement of what the last 365 days meant to him. And he's right. These life lessons will carry him through life because one day, for all of us, life will start lifing. And it's in these moments that we have to remember to pick ourselves up and keep going. It's in those moments where we have to remember that we are not defined by our setbacks and challenges, but by our ability to persevere and overcome them. ABIII, thanks for the reminder. And for all of you out there in JMU Sports Nation, thank you for listening to the second episode of To the House. We're taking it to the house right now. Make sure you follow us on all the socials. Jack, you helped me out with this earlier, but we are on X. I think they changed the name. Is that right?
Some people
we are
call
on
it
X at JMU To the House. We are also on Instagram at JMU To the House. Make sure you follow us, like, listen, and subscribe to the podcast. And make sure you listen to JMU Sports News on the JMU Sports News Network. For Jack Fitzpatrick, I am your host, Delvin Joyce, the People's Choice. Let's take it to the house. Go Dukes.